Dear listeners, thank you so much for coming to this very first panel of Prairie Comics 2025, where we're going to be talking about pitching to publishers. My name is GMB Chomichuk. Don't let those fancy initials fool you. The G stands for Gregory. Why I am moderating this panel is I've been hurt before. I have submitted to many publishers over my career of the last 25 years, and many times received those horrible rejections. Had my dreams trod on by the likes of these folks who are here on the panel. I see you're getting nervous, but I mean it out of love. It is a necessary thing for publishers to say no. But a lot of people who are new to publishing wonder why, wonder if it's them, wonder if they should take it personally, believe their work is no good because they received just a single rejection. So as part of setting the framework so that you guys know that I'm in fact not a hostile moderator, when I began, my rule was I think I'm going to be a writer. If I do not collect one rejection a week, I am not doing my job as a writer. And so I set that as my task. And so submitted wildly and widely and received many rejections as a result and learned so much from those rejections, each one making me a better writer. So please understand that I know the necessity of those no's, but I think it would be great for us to talk about some of the subtleties that go into how that pitching to publishers work, and just have a nice conversation as far as that goes. What I'll have you each do, if you don't mind, is introduce yourself, and then a sentence or two about the kinds of things your press publishes or wants to be publishing in the future. Because I'm sure some of the people here are like, I might have one of those in the pile, right? Raise your hand if you are actively working on your manuscript right now. Yeah, there's a few here, see? That's why they're here. They're here for you. I feel like I've picked on you this whole time because you're writing. Yeah, so we'll make Jonathan Ball go first.
So I'm Jonathan Ball, and I'm a writer myself of poetry, fiction, nonfiction, comics, movies, whatever. And also I am the publisher of Stranger Fiction. And we publish unconventional genre work. So my kind of sweet spot is weird, dark, horror, fantasy, science fiction. Comics and prose.
Okay. I'm Jeff Ellis from Cloudscape Comics, and we've been publishing in Canada for I think about 18 years now. What we're looking for, I guess we're looking for Canadian creators primarily. Currently we're mostly doing Pacific Northwest, so being a BC creator is also an asset, but not necessary. We're starting to look at Canada Council funding, not just BC Council funding. We tend to do stuff that's a little more YA, all ages. We haven't had a lot of success with really extreme content, and then people really like spooky books that we do, so we have a lot of kind of Halloween adjacent books. But yeah, I think that's Cloudscape.
I'm going to interrupt Jeff briefly to say that when Jeff and I first met, whether he knows this or not, one of the first things I said to you was, oh, are you actively looking for submissions? And he said, oh, are you actively from British Columbia? I said, no. And he said, well, then no. So the fact that that's changed a bit is interesting.
Yes, well, I mean, we used to primarily fund things with BC Arts Council funding, so it kind of had to be a BC resident. But recently we haven't been getting those grants, so we're starting to look at Canada Council, which means, yeah, we can cast our net a little wider now.
Perfect.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Vivian. I actually am just an author. I'm not a publisher myself, so I'm sort of speaking.
Just. Look at these things, just.
Make middle grade graphic novels. So I'm sort of speaking to it from that perspective. And I also do like very small scale self-publishing for comic festivals. So yeah.
All right. Well, Vivian, let me ask you a question. Which of these should I cast my baleful eye upon first?
Probably this one. This is the first book of the duology, and it's also the first book that I published.
And you wrote and illustrated it?
Yes.
And you submitted it widely
Yes.
and widely?
Yes.
Yes. How many rejections did you get from the likes of people like that?
Probably, I want to say like upwards of 10 something. I do have an agent to help me submit, so I'm not taking the hit directly.
See, we've already hit on two key features of pitching to publishers. So did you have an agent when you began pitching?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that was one of the first things I wanted to do because I knew that I come from an animation background, so I'm not well versed enough with the publishing industry to know what I'm doing. So I knew that I needed somebody
Drawing
to
24
help
frames
me.
for a second wasn't enough
Yeah,
to
no.
believe you knew? Yeah,
No,
you
it
did
wasn't. I didn't have the connections.
So you've
Yeah.
already dispelled one very important myth here for pitching to publishers, which is, oh, if I had an agent, it would be easy. In fact, not true.
Yeah, you still get rejected.
Yeah. Does it feel softer when your agent says, turns out they hate us?
A little bit.
A little
Because
bit.
your agent will also ask you, like, do you want me to forward you the rejections? And you can say no. So then she won't tell you that they didn't like your pitch.
I've recently become agented as well, and I like the rejection. I want to know what they didn't like.
Yeah, I do also ask for the emails because I'm nosy and I want to know.
Now, is it because you like the feeling of pain, like I do, or is it because you feel like sometimes, and in all seriousness, what often is a single sentence or a single line that clarifies what it is they weren't looking for that they found in your work? Is that what you look for?
It does help for me because at first I thought it was purely on basis of whether or not they like the work. But as I get more into publishing, I realize also it's like sometimes the marketing team doesn't feel that it fits with their publishing brand, or it's like they have another title coming up with a similar vibe and they don't want the two to compete. So it's not always about your work, why it's being rejected. Sometimes like they have a lot of other concerns. So for me, I like reading those rejections really helped because editors are not trying to like, this sucks and I hated it. They will give you a professional response telling you why they didn't pick it up. And for me, it really helped me to get a better sense of what's going on in publishing.
I think this is a perfect segue to draw in the publishers into the conversation, which is, could either of you speak to some of the reasons why a work might be great, but not right for a publisher?
No, that's I wanted to talk about that, so that's great.
Thanks, Vivian.
I mean, I think that especially with what we're doing in Cloudscape, we're a very small press. We're like a micro press, and as I said, most of our stuff was funded with Arts Council grants for a very long time. And so for us, sometimes it's just like, does this fit the purview of the BC Arts Council, right? If the creator's not from BC or the creator's not from Canada, like that immediately is a roadblock, even if it's an amazing book. And then now that we've been publishing for 18 years, we sort of have a catalog of work. You were sort of talking about, does it fit the brand? And I think we sort of found that we do really well with young adult, more all ages books. And so like we printed a book that I thought was amazing, had amazing art. It was really funny, but it was also really, really raunchy and like had nudity and sexual situations. And I can't sell it. Like, I mean, I want to sell it, but like when I put it on the table, it doesn't sell, and then it starts to become a liability to the other works where,
Right.
families are coming by to buy the family-friendly book, and then the kid tries to grab that book, and I'm like, no, don't buy that. So you have to sort of put them on opposite sides of the table, and it's just, I think what I kind of realized from that is like, we just shouldn't be doing 18 plus content because so many of our books are family-friendly. We should just stick with that it just like fits with our brand, right?
And for the dear listeners here, when you're wondering where do imprints come from in publishing, this is where imprints come
Right.
from and why they are created. It's
Yeah.
a way to separate the
Yeah.
brand and have things on
Yeah.
one space that do not deter the people you've worked so hard
Yeah.
to bring as an audience.
Yeah, we just don't have enough size or capacity to do an imprint. So for us, it's like we have to develop what's working, and just more kind of general audience content is what's working for us. So that might be one reason you get rejected if your stuff's just really extreme. It's got a lot of extreme sexual content or violent content. We're probably just going to say no because we just don't think there's a market for that in our personal or in our brand specifically. There might be another publisher out there that's going to be a really good fit for you. It just doesn't work for what we're doing, right?
This speaks a little bit to what I wanted to mention, which is when I teach creative writing, writers often will ask me, how do I get published? And they often think it's a very mysterious and complex process. I always say there's only two things you have to do to be published. That's it. You have to, one, write publishable work, which is easier said than done. But you have to write publishable work. And then two, you have to send it to an appropriate market. And that is the thing that a lot of people really don't understand because they don't do market research. They don't read the books the publishers put out. They don't have an awareness of what magazines exist or publishing or what ones pay or whatever. And they're submitting wildly, which I don't recommend. I've worked, again, I've got a publishing company now, but I've worked in different capacities in publishing, and I would see constantly these kinds of submissions that come across. I remember working at a literary journal in Alberta called Dandelion, and Dandelion was a magazine, and it published a magazine. And we had our submission guidelines. We'd take up to 10 poems. We'd take stories up to 5,000 words. That's what we published. That's all we published. And I would constantly get book submissions, and I would instantly reject every book submission because I don't publish books. And people would get into back and forth discussions with me. I remember one time a guy submitted a poetry book to me, and I just emailed back and rejected it immediately without reading it. And I said that. I said, look, I'm rejecting this without reading it because we don't publish poetry books. But we do publish poetry. If you want to take 10 of your best poems and send them to us, then great, do that. And then he emails me back and says, well, just pick the 10 you like best. And so now I'm in this back and forth. I'm like, well, no. I go, your job is to pick the 10 poems you like best and submit them to us. Then he says to me, I don't have time to read through my entire manuscript and pick out the 10 poems that I like best. And I just am like, the disconnect in a person's head around things like that. That's where so many people falter. And it's not that they're clueless. It's just that they haven't thought through what the process is and how it's sort of happening on the other end.
This prompts a question I have now for Vivian, who I've only known now for, how long has this panel been? Maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I've known you for 10 minutes, so I'm going to ask you a question that normally you would ask a person after spending a whole weekend at a convention together, and now you and your friends are out for dinner, and you've vetted yourselves, and you realize these are my people, and it's okay if you ask an uncomfortable question. We're going to skip that part, and I'm just going to ask you directly, Vivian. Are you easy to work with?
Not at first.
Not at first.
Because,
All right.
yeah, I didn't know what I should expect.
Oh,
And I didn't
interesting.
have any other friends in publishing at the time to ask them to be like, hey, is this normal? Or like, is there something else? And so at first I was quite difficult, I think.
Now, what would you describe as difficult? And I think this is interesting, particularly to the dear listeners, because there's always the fear that you'll say the wrong thing in the initial correspondence, and that person clearly did. You clearly did not, right? So
Eventually.
right? Eventually. So, what was that process like for learning to say the right thing?
I think a lot of it was learning how to work with my editor, and because we both want what's best for the book, and maybe sometimes we have different ideas about things, but I've learned that when she gives me a criticism, it's not personal. Yeah, it's she sensed that there's something wrong with like this plot point or this character development, and she's trying to point it out to me, and I like have really learned through these 2 books how to like pinpoint what is wrong with what she's pointing out.
Right, and recognizing that the editorial concerns of the publisher are with the work and not the worker.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's hard to separate when it feels so personal,
Right.
but there is a separation.
Yeah.
The publisher cares about your book,
Yeah.
and they want what's best for your book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, any notes you're getting, it's to make the work stronger and to
Yeah.
help the work be received better by the audience, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, you have to sort of, in terms of the work process, you have to not take it personally, and also in terms of the pitching, you have to not take it personally, because it isn't personal. It's just like, you know, there's so many factors. You're just kind of doing the calculation, like, is this going to work for this year? Is this going to fit in our publishing calendar? Like, there's so many variables, you know. But yeah, in terms of being a successful artist in publishing, you being easy to work with reminded me that, borrowing this from a friend, that he was saying, if you want to be successful as an artist in comics, you've got to be 2 of 3 things, which is really talented, always meet your deadlines, easy to work with. Ideally, you're all 3, but if you can hit 2 of those
2
things,
is good enough, we're told.
then you can drop the ball on one of those 3.
So maybe it's a good time to bring in everybody on the following question. How do you know when the publisher, the marketing team, the agent, the editor all see the work the same way? Because if you don't, you're now all at cross purposes. How did you know? Because you have admitted now in your own personal experience, and now that's just what we're talking about, your personal experiences. You felt that they wanted to make the work better, and you agreed the work could be made better by those actions, which means a certain truth has been discovered by accident. You all believe you understand the book the same way and agree with each other. How do you know that that's happening?
I mean,
I disagree with the premise that it could happen or should happen.
Of course,
Because
Jonathan Ball.
what you bleed into with that kind of thinking is committee design. And it's the death knell of this kind of project. And so I've been, at least in my case, I've worked very specifically to set things up in such a way that I don't have a marketing team. I don't have a bunch of people talking to me about things. It's me and an author.
So
And
where
that's
does the
it.
buck stop?
At me and the author, because I'm looking at it as a partnership. I as a writer, I've worked with some very good publishers that I love, like Coach House and Book Hug, and I've worked with other publishers.
Which we will not name.
And
But it was awful.
I got very frustrated with the reality that the industry is set up in such a way that publishers are too often structurally encouraged to be parasites and not partners. And this creates a situation where the authors also operate somewhat parasitically rather than as being partners. And so you see phenomenon like authors who start with small presses and jump to large presses. There's no reason to be with a large press over a small press, except for this structural instability that has happened in the publishing industry over the years, where there's a level of advantage in shifting around between presses for the author, and there's a level of advantage for publishers to grab and drop authors. And so my point of view on it has been that this system isn't sustainable. We're seeing cracks in that system. And the way around it, I think, is a difficult thing, but it's partially a mindset shift between authors and publishers where they're trying to partner more fully. And I think what that requires, so that theoretically at least leads to scenarios like an author staying with a publisher. And it also, I think, requires fewer cooks in the kitchen and a clearer sense from the author what their career goals are, and a clearer sense from the publisher of like how we can align all these things so that we're both, doing well together, and we don't have this scattershot, trying to make it all marketable to this, that, and the other demographic and spin this thing off it and so on. You can do a lot with the property if you are not thinking about it in these committee type terms, and you're trying to pull too many people together, because they can't say the same. If it's a good artwork, by definition, everyone will take something different out of it. Mm-hmm. So once you have alignment, you're reducing it.
Jeff has been ignited. Go.
No, I mean, I really like the way you phrased that. But yeah, I mean, this is something with Cloudscape. We started as an art collective, and we did work just in partnership. And I think we're trying to keep that idea of a partnership moving forward. I mean, in terms of us, do we have the shared vision? I mean, I think we do between, the editor and the artist. But I think part of that is because we go through that at the vetting process. So I don't think we've really ever been at cross purposes with our artists, because we only publish stuff that we really believe in when we read that first manuscript. And so if we have edits, it's like refining the vision that's already on the paper. Like, I don't think we have any we're not offering big notes. We're not saying, we just redo the ending. It's more just like, hey, the lettering could be better here, or
right.
Like maybe this one sequence could be a little cleaner, but like, we're not offering major notes. It's usually minor sort of storytelling things.
You've already alluded to the idea that you can love a book, put everything into having it released, and then realize it doesn't fit with the vision that had already been established.
Yeah,
to no fault of anybody's efforts.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I really believed in Much the Miller's Son, but then when it actually was sitting on the table next to all the other books, it was like, oh, oops, like that doesn't really fit with everything else that's on this table,
What I've found, dear listeners, is that I've done in my career, I don't know the exact number, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 books and graphic novels. And they range from the heartwarming to the blood curdling, and they range all over. And sometimes if I have one book that doesn't fit the rest, the only way to fix it is to make sure there are 3. It's not to give up when the one is not working, but to make 2 others.
Yes, I mean,
to accompany it, so it's not alone on the table.
I mean, I think
we've all been that kid in the lunchroom.
Yeah, if we had more capacity, I would like to sort of develop the 18+ imprint of Cloudscape and sort of make a space for Much the Miller's Son to sort of have some friends beside it on the table. But I think, just currently in this current environment, it's tough, right? I think that's maybe one thing wouldn't mind making sure is included in this panel is like currently, right now in 2025, with the cost of printing, all the paper, all the printing costs went up after the pandemic. We used to print everything in Canada. It got so expensive. We started printing stuff in China. That maybe was a mistake at this point because of the way things are shaking out with tariffs. Even
See
the
recent
Canadian stuff.
geopolitical news for further information.
Then I don't want to get into all the stuff, but it's just like, things have shifted. The way you get books in the mail to people in the United States is just a complete gong show right now. We fund all of our stuff, not just with grants, but also with Kickstarter. And so we used to depend on a certain percentage of American backers on Kickstarter projects. We're not sure if we're going to have that moving forward. And so, it costs a lot of money to produce the books. It also, just as a publisher, it costs a lot of money to continue to be a publisher. Like, getting your distribution out, like we have a distributor, but that has fees every month. There's cost on having a distributor. There's cost on our storage locker. There's surcharges on all the credit card transactions. There's insane costs on shipping currently. So like when we're choosing to publish something, we really have to make sure that we feel confident that this is going to sell and make some money back, because
So there's
it's
a good silver lining here, though, in all that dreariness you just described. If you are a person who got through
yeah.
and you are now feeling yourself in that pitching to publisher stage where they have feedback that can be perceived as negative. Oh, maybe they don't like the book after all. Keep in mind that that's coming from a place where they've already decided to incur all of those other problems related to your book, and now they just want it to have the best, most aerodynamic shape to fit in there.
My daughter was reading, she got an internship at a publisher, and she was reading, one of the jobs that they gave her was going through the slush pile and just identifying, books that they might recommend, she might recommend that they take a closer look at. And she was really struggling with it, because she said, some of them you just can instantly tell they're not publishable, but other ones, they're kind of in this weird space where they're good enough to be published, but should we publish them? I don't know. What do you? And she was she had this big pile. She's like, I got to whittle this pile down. I don't know how to do it. I said, think of it this way. Would you pay $50,000 to publish that book? You yourself. Not that it costs that much necessarily, but when all the world is done, you're kind of in that ballpark.
The minimum costs are
I go, and if it, as good as it is, it adds up. And you got to think from that point of view, is it feasible?
I think because we're recording this and it will go out to other places than Canada, really important for us to take a moment. I don't know if you want to bow your head or lift up your eyes towards the future, but as difficult as the grant system is in Canada to navigate, the fact it exists at all is a miracle.
Well,
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, we've got a lot of advantages as Canadians. I recently was reminded that Americans have to pay for ISBN numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So as a Canadian, you just go to the government website, you get your ISBN number, and that's just a free service because they want Canadians publishing books. Where in the States, it's a free market. So therefore, if you want to make a book, you got to spend some money to get those ISBN numbers, right? Where there is some government supports to make Canadian culture happen, and that is really important. I hope that continues. I hope that in our current elbows up mindset that we see more money going into Canadian culture and strengthening all forms of Canadian culture. So we are very lucky as Canadians to have those supports.
Okay, I have a question for Vivian here now, related to pitching to publishers, which is what our panel is about, not pummeling the political pundits in publishing. That's a different panel. That'll be later tonight after dinner. You said that you pitched 10 times or received 10 rejections. What was the number of pitches that went out, and were they different than the number of rejections you received?
Actually, when I work with an agent, she sort of, I'm not exactly sure what her magic is, but I assume that she emails editors all at the same time.
Would you like to name drop her? Do you get along well enough that?
Oh, my agent?
Yes.
Yeah, she's Tao Le, and she's based in the States, so I've actually never met her.
Even more mysterious and
I've never
magical.
actually met with any of the people that made these books happen, because they're all in the States.
So just mysterious shadow organizations help make these books possible?
Yeah, I thought I was getting scammed at first when I signed the book deal, because I was like, "There's no way this is real." It was a pandemic, so I was kind of going crazy. But I've never met any of the people.
Would it spoil it if you did now?
I would really like to. I want to, they put so much work into this.
Let's look down lens. We want to meet you.
I would love to meet my editor. Yes. But yeah, so when we pitch, basically she provides me a list of editors at different imprints and houses that she would like to submit to, and she asked me if I have any others to add to the list, and then I assume that she just blasts it out. So that's the one pitch going out all at the same time. Mm-hmm. so that editors can have time to review and decide if they're interested and then get back to us if they're not, which I will say the rejections come in first, because typically, like, you know immediately if this project doesn't work for you, right? Whereas acceptances will be much slower to come in, because once an editor is interested, they have to take it to their team and see if the team agrees, and then they have to take it to another meeting to see if the bigger group agrees, and then they get back to you.
As long as we're talking about secret enclaves, I once had a book being considered by Scholastic, and they explained to me that, you know, it's not enough that I champion this book. The entire Council of Elrond has to also agree.
Exactly.
Right? And so
Yeah.
they bring it to all the other editors, and then they fit it in with the entire, they look and they play, imagine this is our slate of books for that year.
Yeah.
How does it fit into that slate? Oh, this one doesn't, but this one would.
Yeah.
And it's not based on the strength of the book now,
Yeah.
but on the strength of the weather system they're trying to create.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things you don't understand. You can never understand. When I first trying to publish my first book, I got rejections for 3 years straight. But it was very frustrating because every one of the rejections said they loved the book. It was a great book. They hoped someone would publish the book. And every one of them said, this book is, you know, too marketable and too mainstream for us. We do weirder books. We're sure another press will want to publish this book. And I remember at one point getting to being like, I assure you no one wants to publish this book. like just take it. At one point, one of the publishers very helpfully, and kindly gave me a list of other people to send the book to, all of whom had already rejected the book for exactly the same things. I didn't get one negative comment. It was, this weird, and I was like, I wish they were just writing to me saying they hated this book. It would be better in a weird sort of way, because it just makes me feel like there's something fundamentally unpublishable about it. No one understands. Now, eventually the book got published and, did well enough and everything, but, it just, you can't even understand sometimes why the things are getting published or not, because it's sometimes a weird, mysterious marketing reason. It's sometimes they have another book just like it coming out, strangely. It's sometimes that they don't have another book enough like it, to your point. It just doesn't fit, even though they like it. Sometimes it's just some weird insanity. Like,
You want to hear a weird insanity story I heard? I'll leave all the names out to protect the... Actually, it's only protecting the guilty, but it's slander otherwise. The publisher dropped a person's book from a fall list because they didn't have time to redo the art to match what they believed was the new color scheme that was going to sell.
I had a friend...
We don't have time to redo the graphic design to make it look like all the other books in this genre. So we're dropping your title.
I'll leave some names and things out here, but I had a friend who had a deal with a major publishing company, and they dropped the book because Jay Leno's autobiography didn't do well.
All their money disappeared.
They had given him too much money. They had assumed he would market the book on The Tonight Show. He never mentioned it once. And so they lost so much money, they just started canceling contracts.
Oh.
And,
So it can be a lot of reasons
It's who
for
knows?
those of you pitching to publishers that your book is not getting through. But I want to say a few uplifting things to you. Number one, one thing that helped me, it really did, legitimately helped me. This isn't just hyperbole. What legitimately helped me when I began pitching was to remind myself that this isn't the only book I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And so it's okay if they kick it around and don't like it, because I'm going to write something else. I'm going to make something else. And so this isn't my only chance to get through.
Yeah.
And when I realized that that's actually how you break through with an editor and how you break through with a publisher is through continual submission. That is how they know you can take notes, how you can take criticism, how you can withstand the market forces. Oh, you sent me one book, but I didn't like it. You sent me another book that's different in the ways that I suggested it could be different. Wow, you're teachable, right? These kinds of things, it sounds silly, but this is part of that are you easy to work with
It's
feeling.
not. It's also just part of are you real? Because so many people are not real, and what I mean by that is they have they've written a book, and then they've been submitting the book, and they just keep submitting the book and waiting for rejections, and submitting the book, waiting for rejections, but they're not writing anymore.
Right.
They're not real. Like they don't have a career in them. They don't have another book in them. They're not trying to be a writer. They just have, for whatever reason, written a book and started submitting it to publishers. So part of like the vetting process in a strange sort of way is like, is this a real person? Like, are they actually engaged in this process? And the rejection comes into that. So many writers who are starting out, they get very disappointed by rejections, and they report often that rejection makes them feel like they're not a real writer. But I always like to say only real writers get rejections. And if you had to prove to the CRA that you were a real writer, even though you never published anything, you could furnish your rejections as proof. Right. Because they are evidence that you're engaged in the activity, the business activity of writing. And the CRA would consider you to be a writer legitimately in the eyes of the law, even if you yourself don't think you are. So if the CRA thinks you're a real writer because you're getting rejections,
then you can believe in yourself.
If the CRA believes in you not publishing, just because you're doing it, right? Yeah. You're doing it, you're getting, whether you're getting accepted or rejected is in some ways irrelevant. It feels like it's not irrelevant, but it is fundamentally irrelevant because the writing is the thing that makes you, the artist, and that also is the, in the crass business terms of it, the thing that's going to generate the business model.
This is perfect, because now Vivian and I could team up on this side of the table against the two of you. And those of you in the crowd who also have manuscripts, you're on our side here. To remember that publishing is the byproduct of writing, not the point of writing.
Yeah.
Right? That's not, if your only goal is to be published, perhaps you're not going to be published because you are not going to produce a body of work.
I mean, and sort of connected to that, and maybe trying to be positive too.
Positive. Remember positivity?
Yeah,
I know it's rare, but let's have some.
No, but I think it's worth noting, we've had people who pitch us stuff, and then we reject them, and then they go out and they print it themselves anyways, right? Like I always remember this one. We were doing a horror anthology, and we had lots of submissions we were going through, and there was one that was kind of borderline, and in the end, we had we had a couple editors, and so it was decided, okay, we're going to go with this other story, and we're not going to print this one. So we rejected the story, and that artist took their story, they finished it, they finished writing it, they finished drawing it, they made a mini comic, they brought it to the next Vancouver Comic Convention. And I think the editor that rejected the story picked up this book and came to me and was like, how come we didn't put this in this anthology? This should have been in this anthology. It's such a wasted opportunity that we didn't print this story in this anthology. And I was like, well, we had this script, we rejected it. And they're like, really? Yeah, we didn't think they could pull off the art. And they're like, oh, well, they totally did. And I'm like, yeah, the egg's on our face. We made a mistake. We should have picked that story up. So I think
the music industry has a term for this, to show and prove.
Right? So we're not flawless, right? We can make mistakes. There are stories I've rejected that end up getting printed.
Often do.
Yeah. The stories that, they get printed elsewhere, they get picked up by other publishers, or they get self-published. And when you see it finished, you go, oh man, I was totally wrong. And what I really want people to take away from that is don't let that rejection be the reason you just throw it in the bin, right? Maybe I'm not seeing something that is there. And so if you really believe in this, to your point, it's if you really believe in this, if you're for real, just move forward and either finish it, or if you keep getting rejections, reflect and go, what is not working? And maybe you make a little change, you make your own edit, and then now it's getting picked up, right? So just finish it, because this is the big thing. It's it's nothing until it's finished. And I get so many submissions where there's no art drawn, the script isn't done. They're basically emailing me an elevator pitch. And of course I reject it, because like I don't have any faith that you're going to complete this, right? Where
You're
if
not real. As
if you come to me with like a finished work, I'm gonna sit up and take notice, right? So it's like, like finish it.
And rejections are professional correspondence. That's the thing that writers often fail to understand, is a rejection is a professional correspondence. So what that means when they've rejected you, if they sent you the rejection letter, they've recognized you as a professional and responded. And so that's now the beginning of a business correspondence. As to Gregory's point, you can then be submitting to them again a new thing, and there's now a relationship. It's maybe a fairly simple and perhaps one-sided relationship, but you started a business relationship
internet has
in a
trained
weird
us for
sort of
that,
way.
so that's okay.
And you can really like develop those things over time. I remember I published 3 books with Coach House Books. And the first book that I published was not with them, but they had rejected it. I had met the editor, Alana Wilcox, and I'd kind of become friendly with her. And this is back in the days of Facebook when they had Words with Friends. It was a big thing. You played Words with Friends on Facebook with people. And I started playing a Words with Friends game with Alana. And I sent her my manuscript. This is the one that had been rejected for 3 years. And I remember there was one moment, the way I like to tell it is, in my head, I'm like, I know this editor, I'm playing Words with Friends, this is gonna be like, she'll take this, give it a good read and all this stuff. So I remember I made my move in Words with Friends, then she made her move in Words with Friends, and then while I was making my next move, she rejected my manuscript. That was her move, and but that was just the start of the whole business relationship, is me getting rejected and having a back and forth with this person. And then a couple of years later, they picked up one of my book, and then they did 2 more of my books. Then they rejected my next book. And
it's not a personal attack.
It's not personal. I was actually begging her. I was texting her. At this point, I've got her text, and I'm texting her hey, if you haven't had a chance to look at the book, it's totally fine if you reject it. I just am trying to offer it to you before I send it to anyone else. So if you don't want it, great, tell me right away, and I'll send it to someone else. And so eventually, she's like, I just can't do it because we published this other book. They had accepted this other book by Kamila Grudova, a much better book, I'll point out. And I was like, they're like, we can't do 2 books of short stories. It's just not going to work. I'm like, I understand that.
There's an elephant in this room I need to address related to this. You're a micropress, self-identified as a micropress here,
yes,
right? Which means you don't have staff,
yeah,
right? But a lot of what Jonathan's story signifies is I can hear my teenage son saying, "Never slide into the DMs," right? No matter in a professional world, you never slide into the DMs, and yet, right? When you are a micropress or a small press, sometimes the only person you're going to reach is the actual decision maker or the boss.
Yeah.
Can you talk for a moment as publishers how difficult it is now that you're on the receiving end of that to be maybe too easy to reach?
We've tried to build a little bit of a safeguard around that. We actually have a Google Voice specifically so I don't get random cold calls on my personal cell phone. That's because we're a nonprofit society, so we have a board of directors, and the board ultimately sign off on stuff, and so that is kind of my insulation. Is someone can come to me and I'm like, well, we'll put that before the board, and the board will make a decision. So it's I as much as I am probably part of the decision making process, I can't autonomously just make a decision.
Okay,
so
then
they can get through
in
to me, but
Jonathan's
it doesn't
case,
mean.
So I'm the
can't.
reverse.
Yeah.
I'm very easy to reach, and I'm fine with being easy to reach because I have no problem saying, no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do this book. I don't like it. As Gregory knows, I don't have a problem with it, but I get why, and I don't have a board specifically so that I don't have to go to someone and, ask. But I've just chosen to do things a different way, and there's disadvantages to how I do it.
Can I make
I'm
a
not
point
eligible
here?
for a lot of funding and so on and so forth.
I would like to point out that though Jonathan seems like a curmudgeon who hates everyone, he has perhaps, I haven't reviewed yours recently, but probably Stranger Fiction has one of the fairest creator-owned contracts in Canadian publishing. It's probably the best deal you can get is at Stranger Fiction if you are seen as the right kind of partner for the project, right? So yes, there is a quid pro quo there, you know?
But I want to be, sorry? So my
Great
base
question.
contract would be 20% royalties of net revenue rather than 10, after an advance. And then after the advance is earned out, I jump to around 30, 40, 50%, depending on the number of things. But again, like, you know, and there's other things to kind of up in there. But for the most part, like, again, I'm not doing a lot of books. I'm trying to be very select. I am a for-profit, but I don't necessarily make a lot of profit because I've chosen to do things in such a way where I don't have the advantages of, say, a nonprofit, but I don't have the hassles of a nonprofit. So, you know, I'm trying to keep things at a very particular level. At the same time, I'm in the kind of process of expanding quite a bit right now. I've just sort of signed a distribution deal and so on and so forth. So, you know, but again, like at a certain point, typically, you know, you have to walk a weird line as a publisher between like how corporatized are you going to get? And, you know, the more money comes into it, the more, like you have all these weird rules, especially in Canada, around like how much money can you even make. Like I have limits on how much money I can make passively, for example, as a corporation versus actively. There's all sorts of things that, you know, writers don't need to care about that come into the thing. But you know, how I've chosen to do things and how I want to do things maybe versus another publisher is I'm really trying to vet the author more than the book on a certain level. Like I want to only do particular books that I'm interested in for specific reasons. But I'm also like looking for people who are, you know, that I could work with. And so I can't be at a remove. Like I need to be connectable because my plan is to work with you, if that makes sense. So I can't be kind of walling myself behind other people. Therefore, I can't get past a certain level of size, right? And so on. It's already becoming too big for me, you know, as a person on some level. But so to your point, Gregory, though, like it isn't that it's the better way to do things. It's probably the worst way to do things.
Yeah, well, what I wanted to illustrate the difference is that both are viable paths in publishing and both are proper and necessary, but not every person you are pitching to, dear listeners, have the same model.
Yeah.
And it's really the only way to find out is to receive those rejections, ask why, find out the edges of that rejection, and figure out what the business model is and if that's a good fit for you or not.
And maybe just, I don't know, just because it came up, I actually want to say, like to everyone who's a prospective author, artist, read your contracts. Like,
oh my gosh.
I think that
carefully.
We had a chance to do some mentorship with Drawn and Quarterly, and they had a look at our contract, and they actually were pretty positive about. We were really like, oh, we tried our best, and they were like, no, this is a good contract. So that was good feedback to get. But you know, like I think we're pretty fair to our artists. But I know that there are other small presses and micro presses that their contract is maybe just like a drawing of a handshake, and that makes things more complicated if there's money problems. But also, like I've heard stories about, you know, people getting their works kind of locked in and they want to get their work back and then they just can't get it back from the publisher. So like for your own sake, read the contract, be clear about what you're agreeing to when you sign up with a small press. And I say that as someone running a small press, like make sure you're clear what I'm offering you and that you're happy with that so that we're both happy when we're done.
And
you know?
something I think that I often see tied to that is you'll often see on social media authors complaining about something their publisher is doing. And what they fail to understand or fail to communicate perhaps is that typically the things they are complaining about are the things they have agreed to and put in the contract. And so the reality is the publisher has to do those things. They have to do it. Whether they like it or not, that's what they agreed to do. And if they don't do it, they're in violation of the contract. And so you'll get in these situations, I'll see these situations on social media where somebody's like saying, well, my publisher's not paying me this, that, and the other thing. It's like, yeah, but that's what the contract says. And they'll even mention that like, oh, they're only giving me X or Y. Like, they got this horrible contract. It's like, but you signed the contract. So now they have to do that. They can't do a different thing. And so you really need to so maybe whether they are trying to take advantage of you or not, they have to do what they agreed to do. And so you have to really understand what it is you want and what it is you're signing up for. I'll say a lot of times to writers, like, because they'll ask me things like, well, should I get an agent? Should I get a manager? What publishers or do I want to go with? And I say, like, you have to first answer the question of what do you want? Because the problem with an agent is the agent can only do what they can do, and they have to know what you want. Like, if you don't know what you want and you just think the agent will solve the problem is that you don't know what you want. So what's the agent going to do? They're going to do the standard thing, which may or may not be what you want. The publisher is similar. The publisher has a standard deal. Do you want that deal or do you want a different deal? We signed it. We just got our rights back from a publisher, me and Gregory, on a book we did. And the reason we got the rights back was because, the publisher had various problems. We're still in good terms with the publisher, but it was an easy process to get our rights back because when they offered the contract, we rewrote the contract.
To include a clause that said, under the following conditions, we will take our rights back, and we just have to notify you that we're going to.
Right, and they were
so
like,
then
fine
we
with
did
that.
what we said we'd do, and that was that.
Because, it's not that you can do that all the time, but, from time to, you have to really just be clear what it is you're asking for, what it is you need to be, like, you need to know what your business is.
Okay, so
and
we
how
have,
it works, and what you need, what you can sign, what you can't sign.
I'm going to cut you off in a way there, Jonathan, because we have about 10 minutes, maybe 7, depending on how strict we're going to be here. And in this 10 minutes, what I want to do is for the dear listener, I want you to imagine that you have come to a water park. And the water park is called Working in Publishing, right? And there are slides of various heights and various danger levels. And when you're talking about the contract process or you're talking about the submission process, you can see most of them from the ground, but you can't see all their twists and turns. And many of those twists and turns at the water park are hidden so that they are a surprise once you're on the ride. And so it's really important that when you get to the top of whatever slide you're trying to go down, that you can stop before you get on and ask the person who is standing there at the top of the slide what it's really like. That is totally and always within your rights. There is a feeling when you're pitching to publishers that you have to be careful or coy and not ask them for the whole story because you're afraid of putting them off. If the slide emerges underwater and you can't swim, you need to know that before you go down the slide. So when you're pitching to publishers, please be as forthright as possible. Do all the work ahead of time. If you need a personal flotation device, have it on before you get to the top of the slide, and that can be an agent. That can be a previous publisher. That can be a friend who's been in publishing. Those things are how you navigate that wet and wild world of trying to get to the end without drowning.
Do your research, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel obligated to say this because I say this at every pitching to publishers. Like, the publisher probably has submission guidelines, so like start there. Like, go to the website, learn about the publisher, read the guidelines. Because again, I get so many pitches where like they clearly haven't read the guidelines, and that makes it really easy to vet, right? So just do your research, read the guidelines.
Now,
If someone emails me a pitch, I reject it. And the reason is that I only take paper submissions. So they haven't read the guidelines. It's a very simple process, But I made my guidelines very particular and unusual Very simple and easy to do, but very particular and unusual, so that
Oh.
you can instantly see if they've read it.
I have a question from the crowd, who is also, we know, from a previous Ride in the Lift, a publisher.
I wondered, what's the most useful thing that you put in your submissions guidelines that has like helped you vet your?
Just for the purpose of the video, I'll restate your question, right? What is the most useful thing you've put in your guidelines that has helped receive pitches or navigate pitches?
I tell them in the cover letter, they have to say why they would be a good partner.
Jeff is
there's a-
stealing that.
I stole that. I stole that in a certain sense from there's a finance business guy who I remember once seeing an interview with him, and somebody asked him, how do I get a good partner? And they're talking about business partners, and he's like, the thing that people always ask me is, how do I find a good partner? He goes, and that's the mistake that you're making right there. He goes, what you should be asking yourself is, how can I be a good partner? He goes, and if you are a good partner and you inculcate these qualities, then you will find good partners. But if you're just looking for a good partner, now you're almost a bad partner before it starts, because you're just looking to take something. It's just that mindset has to sort of be there for me, at least.
I mean, I guess for our submission guides, I think one is that we sort of have a little spiel about what kind of a publisher we are and what kind of stories we're looking for. So like just giving people a sense of the vibe up front. So like when people pitch stuff that's completely off pitch, it's like, okay, you didn't read the beginning of this document, which is, here's who we are as a publisher, and now you're pitching me this thing that's completely like atonal to that. I think the other thing was just, we often ask people to outline their timeline. Like, we're like, how long do you think it's going to take you to finish this? Because that is really useful information for us, because now that we have a distributor, we have to meet our deadline. So if you're pitching us something and you're like, I'm not going to finish this for the next 3 years, okay, that's really important information for us to know up front. Yeah.
I'll rephrase the question for Vivian's sake so that you can answer. What's something that you included in the pitch that was the absolute right thing to include, that maybe your agent suggested or a friend suggested that you didn't think to include, but once you did, you felt it was the magic?
I was gonna say this earlier too, was your points about like proving that you're a real person. Something that that actually nobody suggested, but I sort of accidentally did, that I think worked out in my favor as a debut graphic novel artist, was that I had made a bunch of finished short comics that were self-contained, like 4 pages to like 8 pages. And they were done to a degree that people can look at them and be like, oh, she's serious about making comics. And they were just on my website. And the publishers, when they were looking at my pitches, as someone who has never done a long form, like a long form 300-page comic, they could look at my short comics and see that like, oh, she's kind of serious about this and she wants to do a longer comic. She just doesn't have the platform yet.
I saw your question there, but I just have one point to add here, which is one thing I wish I had done sooner, which was make sure I had 2 or 3 page stories that were completely done. We have one last question, and then the next panel is coming in.
Okay. Where do you suggest starting with market research in general? Because, I think a lot of us here are artists and marketing is scary.
Don't use the internet.
The local bookstore.
Use the bookstore, use Prairie Comics Festival, talk to the editors that are here, get their cards, the internet is so full of things that are not real now. Come where the faces are. Not Facebook, but face to Facebook.
I used to go to McNally, and I would go to the magazine section. I would just see what magazines were there, and I would flip through them, and I would look at them, and I would read their submission guidelines, and I would go to their websites, and I would just get a bunch in the library sometimes or whatever. Now that there's more bookstores and more especially, like if I was starting out today, I couldn't have done this at the time, but if I was starting out today, I would go to because I'm a horror guy, I would go to Ravensend and just talk to Chelsea,
Yeah.
Like who's doing what, who's around doing cool things, what are the good publishers, the bookshelf that you have at your home is a great place to start. Who published these books? A lot of people don't know that because they never thought to pay attention to it. If you flip through recent books on the back, they'll often thank editors. They'll often thank their agents. If you write kind of like this other author, well, who's their agent? These are the sorts of things you need to kind of know, because theoretically, that's the crew you want to connect to, at least, in a dream world, if not in reality.
Now, just in deference to the next group that's coming up, it is exactly 12:01, and they were on time, a little early, in fact, and we ran a little over time.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap that up there. But I will, as a last thought, say, if you have more questions, we are all of us available upstairs at Prairie Comics Festival. We're very approachable, and as you can see, have many different perspectives. So if there was one that really spoke to you, come and ask some follow-up questions. We would love to chat with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.